Right now, as you are watching this, emergency crews across 3 countries are still assessing the damage from an earthquake that struck just hours ago, shortly before 11 a.m. Eastern Time today, July 17th, 2026. A powerful magnitude, 7.3 earthquake ruptured off the Pacific coast of Mexico, right near the Guatemala border. Within minutes, tsunami warnings were issued across multiple countries, government buildings were evacuated in Guatemala City, and the shaking was felt by millions of people from Mexico City all the way down to El Salvador. This is a breaking, still developing story, and today we are going to break down exactly what happened, why this stretch of coastline is one of the most seismically dangerous zones on the planet, what the tsunami threat actually meant, and what happens next. No guessing, no dramatizing, just the facts, the science, and the real stakes. Drop a comment right now. Have you ever felt an earthquake, big or small? Tell me where you were and what it felt like. If you want to be the first to know every time something major happens geologically, subscribe to the channel right now. It is completely free. A thumbs up also helps enormously. Let's go for 5,000 likes on this one, so the algorithm actually shows it to the people who need to see it. Thank you. Now, let's get into it. What happened this morning? According to the U.S. Geological Survey, the earthquake struck at a depth of roughly 10 kilometers, about 6 miles, with an epicenter located approximately 71 kilometers, or 44 miles, west-southwest of the town of Puerto Madero, Mexico, just off the Chiapas coastline near the Guatemalan border. USGS measured the magnitude at 7.3, though some independent monitoring networks and early news reports recorded it as high as 7.4, a difference that reflects how initial magnitude readings often get revised slightly as more seismic data comes in during the first few hours after a major quake. A shallow depth of 10 kilometers is significant, and if that number sounds familiar, it's because it's almost identical to the depth of the Venezuela earthquake sequence that devastated that country back in June. When a rupture happens close to the surface like this, far less seismic energy gets absorbed by the rock between the fault and the surface, meaning the shaking that reaches populated areas is significantly more intense than a deeper earthquake of the same magnitude would produce. Within moments of the quake, the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center issued warnings for coastal Mexico and Guatemala, forecasting local tsunami waves of 1 to 3 feet. A broader advisory extended down the coast, covering Colombia, Costa Rica, Ecuador, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, Panama, and Peru, where waves up to 1 foot were considered possible. Local and national governments responded immediately. Footage from Guatemala City showed office workers streaming out of buildings mid-morning as emergency evacuation protocols activated. Oaxaca's governor, Salomon Jara, confirmed the shaking was felt with moderate intensity in the state capital. And Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum stated that preliminary reports showed no major damage in the immediate aftermath. The aftershocks are still coming. This earthquake did not happen in isolation. USGS reported at least 10 aftershocks in the hours following the main shock, ranging between magnitude 4.9 and 6.0. That second number matters more than people realize. A magnitude 6.0 aftershock is not a minor tremor. It is a significant earthquake in its own right, capable of causing damage on its own, especially to structures that were already weakened by the initial shaking. When a region experiences a sequence like this, emergency responders have to treat every aftershock as a potential new hazard, not just an echo of the first event. USGS's automated damage assessment system estimated that significant damage was likely in the region, and that some fatalities were possible, while also projecting the total economic loss at under 1% of Mexico's GDP, reflecting the fact that the epicenter was offshore rather than directly beneath a dense urban center. One detail USGS specifically flagged is worth understanding on its own. Little to no landsliding was expected from this event, but liquefaction was estimated to be severe in some areas. We'll explain exactly what that means in a moment, because it's one of the most underappreciated earthquake hazards there is. Why this stretch of coastline shakes so often. To understand why an earthquake like this happens here, you have to look at what's happening deep beneath the ocean floor just off this coastline. Along the Pacific coast of southern Mexico and Guatemala, the Cocos tectonic plate is being forced underneath the North American and Caribbean plates in a process called subduction. The Cocos plate is oceanic crust, denser than the continental crust above it, so as the two plates converge, the Cocos plate dives downward into the mantle, while the lighter plate above it gets pushed upward and compressed. This subduction doesn't happen smoothly. Friction locks the two plates together at various points along the boundary, and stress builds up over years or decades until it finally overcomes that friction and the plates lurch past each other, releasing all of that stored energy as an earthquake. This exact mechanism is why the Pacific coast of Mexico and Central America is one of the most consistently active seismic zones anywhere on Earth, part of the same ring of fire system responsible for the vast majority of the planet's major earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. This region has produced major earthquakes repeatedly throughout recorded history, and seismologists monitor it continuously precisely because the Cocos plate's subduction process never stops. It simply alternates between quiet periods of stress accumulation and sudden, powerful releases like the one that happened this morning. Liquefaction. The hazard. Most people don't understand. Let's slow down on liquefaction, because USGS specifically called this out as a severe risk from this earthquake, and it's a phenomenon that causes serious damage without most people ever seeing it coming. Soil, especially loose, water-saturated soil like sand or silt near a coastline or riverbed, normally behaves like a solid, the individual. Particles are locked together by friction, able to support the weight of buildings, roads, and infrastructure above them. When intense earthquake shaking hits that kind of soil, the violent vibration can cause the water trapped between the soil particles to suddenly increase in pressure. That pressure pushes the particles apart from each other, and for a period of seconds to minutes, the ground essentially stops behaving like a solid and starts behaving like a liquid. Buildings can sink, tilt, or partially collapse into the ground. Underground pipes can literally float upward through soil that has temporarily lost its solid structure. Roads can crack open or sink unevenly. This is exactly why USGS flagged this specific risk for this earthquake, and it's also why the agency specifically noted that mud wall and adobe block construction, common in parts of rural Chiapas, Guatemala, and neighboring regions, is particularly vulnerable, both to direct shaking damage and to the ground instability that liquefaction can cause beneath a structure's foundation. Understanding the tsunami threat and why it was downgraded, a lot of people see the words tsunami warning and assume the worst-case scenario automatically follows. That's not how these systems work, and understanding why is important. When a large earthquake ruptures on the seafloor, it can displace an enormous volume of water above it, generating a tsunami. But the size of the resulting waves depends heavily on the type of fault movement, how much the seafloor actually moved vertically, and the specific geometry of the rupture, not just the earthquake's magnitude alone. In this case, the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center's own forecast called for local waves of only 1 to 3 feet along the coast nearest the epicenter, and even smaller waves, up to 1 foot, farther down the coastline. Those are measurable, monitored wave heights, not the kind of towering wall of water people often picture from tsunami footage of far larger, more catastrophic events. As reports came in throughout the day confirming the actual wave heights matched or fell below that forecast, the tsunami threat was declared passed by officials. That said, tsunami warning centers consistently advise that residents remain cautious near the coast even after a warning is lifted, because sea level fluctuations and unusual currents can continue for hours after the main threat has technically passed. How this compares to the region's history, southern Mexico and Central America have experienced significant seismic activity throughout 2026 alone. Just months earlier, a magnitude 7.3 to 7.4. Earthquake struck North Maluku, Indonesia, on the opposite side of the Ring of Fire, generating a smaller tsunami and killing 1 person while damaging over 450 structures. In February, a magnitude 5.8 to 6.2 earthquake struck Pasatan, Indonesia. These events aren't connected to each other in any direct geological sense. The fault systems involved are thousands of kilometers apart, but they illustrate the same underlying pattern we've discussed on this channel before. The Ring of Fire never really goes quiet. It's simply a matter of where along its roughly 40,000 kilometer length the next release of built-up stress happens to occur. For this specific stretch of coastline, seismologists have long identified southern Mexico and Guatemala as a subduction zone capable of producing earthquakes well above magnitude 7 and building codes in Mexico, particularly since the catastrophic 1985 Mexico City earthquake that killed thousands, have been substantially strengthened over the decades, specifically in response to this ongoing seismic risk. That history is part of why, even with a shallow, powerful magnitude 7.3 quake striking this morning, initial reports pointed toward moderate rather than catastrophic damage in Mexico's more modernized urban centers, even as officials continued assessing more vulnerable and rural communities near the epicenter throughout the day. What happens next? In the coming days, expect continued aftershock activity, with USGS and regional seismic networks closely tracking whether the sequence produces any additional significant events beyond the magnitude 6.0 aftershock already recorded. Ground survey teams will assess liquefaction damage in vulnerable coastal soil zones, particularly around Chiapas and the Guatemalan border region, and structural inspections will focus specifically on older adobe and mud wall buildings flagged as high risk by USGS's automated hazard assessment. Coastal residents in the tsunami advisory zone are being told to remain alert for unusual sea level changes, even though the official warning is passed. This is very much still a developing situation as of the time this video is going live, and we will be tracking every update as more detailed damage assessments come in from Mexican and Guatemalan authorities over the next 24 to 48 hours. Final thought. An earthquake like this is a reminder of something we keep coming back to on this channel. The Cocos Plate beneath the Pacific coast of Mexico and Central America has been diving beneath the continent for millions of years, and it will keep doing exactly that. Long after today's headlines fade, what changes from one earthquake to the next isn't the geology. It's how prepared the buildings, the warning systems, and the people in its path happen to be in that specific moment. This morning, a shallow magnitude 7.3 rupture sent a tsunami warning down an entire coastline and reached buildings hundreds of kilometers away in Guatemala City within minutes. And the fact that we're currently talking about moderate damage assessments rather than a catastrophic death toll says something real about how far earthquake-resistant construction and rapid warning systems have come in this region since disasters like 1985. We will keep tracking this story as it develops, along with every other major seismic and volcanic event happening around the world right now. Subscribe so you don't miss the update the moment new damage reports come in, and leave that comment below. Have you ever felt an earthquake? Tell me where and what it felt like. 5,000 likes on this video. Let's go. See you in the next one.